5:47 p.m., an Italian coastal airfield. A bruised purple sky, howling winds smelling of salt and impending disaster. The Hale X-1, a $10 million experimental helicopter, sits motionless, its red emergency lights pulsing like a dying heartbeat. Daniel Moore is buried deep in the rotor assembly. Victoria Hale screams, "Why aren't we airborne yet?" Daniel looks her dead in the eye. "If this bird flies now, someone isn't coming home." She points to the gate. "You're fired. Get out." Daniel leaves in silence. 30 minutes later, the earth trembles. Two Navy Seahawks roar out of the clouds. They didn't just fire a mechanic, they fired a legend. To understand why Daniel Moore can hear what machines cannot say, we must go back 15 years to a secret air base in Afghanistan. Daniel, then a proud young chief technician for SEAL Team 6, stood before a Black Hawk preparing for a night rescue mission. The dust of the Helmand province hung heavy in the air, tasting of copper and grit. "Engine 2 has a strange whistle," Daniel warned his superior, a hardened colonel who only cared about the mission clock. "It's not the wind. It's the sound of a dry bearing grinding against the housing. It's heat, sir. Invisible, but lethal." But time was measured in the lives of hostages held 3 valleys away. The order was absolute. "Fly immediately." "That's an order, Moore." Daniel watched the rotors blur into a halo of dust, a sinking feeling in his gut that no metal could ever wash away. 10 minutes later, a fireball erupted over the Hindu Kush Mountains, a silent scream in the distance. 12 of Daniel's brothers, men he had shared bread and blood with, were gone. The investigation blamed unforeseen mechanical failure, but Daniel knew better. He stood in the wreckage weeks later, finding that single scorched bearing. It was blackened, twisted, a small piece of metal that had swallowed 12 lives. From that day on, he swore that time pressure would never again silence the warning of the machine. He learned to listen to the soul within the cold steel, a language written in vibrations and heat. In the months leading up to the Italian project, Daniel's role was more than just maintenance. He was a silent auditor for the Department of Defense. His tiny workshop at the edge of the hangar was filled with specialized acoustic sensors and thermal imagers. He wasn't just looking for leaks, he was looking for the fatigue signature of the Hale X-1. He had noticed a pattern. Every time the X-1 flew in high salinity environments, the swash plate, the critical component that controls the pitch of the rotor blades, exhibited a microscopic slipstick phenomenon. It was a failure that wouldn't show up on a standard flight data recorder because it happened in the nanoseconds between data samples. Daniel called it the ghost. He had tried to report it 3 times, sending encrypted files to the Hale Aerospace Board. But his reports were intercepted and buried by the Efficiency Committee, headed by Marcus, who viewed Daniel's caution as a threat to the upcoming IPO. Marcus once told the board, "Moore is a technician who thinks he's a philosopher. We don't pay him for opinions, we pay him for greasing gears." Marcus wasn't just an engineer, he was a master of data purification. In his opulent London office, he gazed at the flashing red graph, the real warnings from the X-1, and ordered his subordinates, "Apply the 22B filter immediately. I don't want to see any fluctuations on Victoria's screen. If she sees risk, she'll abort the flight and will lose billions of dollars in investment." He took a sip of expensive wine, staring intently at the simulation. He knew the risks, but in his mind, people were merely interchangeable variables. "An accident could be blamed on the weather or pilot error," he muttered, "but a delayed project would ruin my career. And I never let myself fail." Back in the present, Daniel Moore is a man carved from silence and scar tissue. His face is a map of hard miles and secrets the Pentagon would bury in concrete. To the elite travelers at this coastal terminal, he is invisible. The man in the grease-stained coveralls who smells of jet fuel and old copper. He is a single father, and his entire universe is contained within a small, sun-drenched house where his 9-year-old daughter, Emily, waits. Every morning is a ritual of atonement. He packs her lunch with the precision of a master technician, drawing a small heart on a napkin, a promise that he will return. To Daniel, that promise is a holy mission because he knows the brutal void left by a promise broken by negligence. 6 years ago, Sarah, his wife, died when a commercial jet's hydraulic system failed. It wasn't bad luck. It was a $5 plastic seal used by a contractor to maximize profit margins. A marginal risk that left 180 families hollow. Daniel walked away from the Navy, away from the medals, to work in the shadows of civilian hangars, becoming a silent sentinel against the greed that kills. He promised Emily, "I will never let a machine fail me again. If it's not perfect, it doesn't leave the ground." Scene: the clash with the Queen. Victoria Hale, the Iron Queen of global logistics, represents everything Daniel fought against. She is a woman who sees the world in spreadsheets and shipping lanes. Today, she has a billion-dollar merger in Rome, and the storm outside is merely an inconvenience to her ego. She strides across the tarmac, her designer heels clicking with the mechanical aggression of a firing pin. She finds Daniel deep in the Hale X1's rotor head, his hands steady despite the wind that threatens to knock the tools from the bench. "Why is my pilot reporting a red status delay?" Victoria demands, her voice cutting through the gale like a blade. Daniel doesn't look up. He is feeling the pitch links. The wind is hitting the rotors at a 22-degree shear. There's a harmonic resonance, a ghost in the metal. It's a microfracture in the experimental alloy, Ms. Hale. Salt air and high-stress torque are a bad mix. This alloy was designed for the lab, not for a saltwater storm. Victoria laughs, a sound as cold as the sea. "You're a mechanic, Moore, not an oracle. I have a team of PhDs in London monitoring every sensor on this bird via satellite. They say green. You say ghosts. You're just a man with a wrench trying to get home early because you can't handle the pressure of the big leagues." Daniel finally looked at her, his eyes reflecting the coming storm. He saw the same calculating arrogance that had claimed Sarah's life. The satellite didn't sense the Kickstarter, Mrs. Hale. It didn't hear the screeching of the alloy. If you take off, you have 20 minutes before the rotor snaps off. Your doctors will have plenty of data to analyze the crash, but they won't be the ones falling into the water. Victoria pulled out her phone like a weapon. She connected with Marcus, the chief engineer in London, a man who prided himself on clean hands engineering. Marcus was the one who had approved the cheaper, lighter alloy to please investors, secretly pocketing a commission in his Swiss account. Marcus's office was a cathedral of glass and light, a stark contrast to the grease and storms of the hangar. He stared at the screen displaying a clean, polished reality. "Victoria," he said, his voice condescending, "the sensors are calibrated to 10,000ths of a millimeter. If there were a crack, the system would have reported it. Moore is suffering from an old-fashioned obsession. He can't accept that machines are smarter than humans. He's trying to stifle progress with his greasy hands and a deep-seated hatred of the future." The junior mechanics who idolized Daniel stood in the shadows. They witnessed a work execution. "Fire him," Victoria said to the airport manager. "I'll sign the waiver. Moore, take your tools and get out. You're a risk, a relic of an age where feel mattered. We live in the age of data, and you are a data error." The manager, who knew Daniel was the best mechanic but feared his mortgage more, avoided his gaze. "Name tag, Moore, you're done. Give it here." Daniel didn't beg. He wiped his hands on a rag, moving slowly and deliberately. He gathered his father's old wrench set, tools that had saved lives in 3 different wars. As he passed the young pilot Leo, he saw sweat on the boy's forehead. "Leo," Daniel whispered, his voice carrying absolute authority through the wind. "Feel the vibration with the soles of your feet. Don't look at the screen. When you reach 500 feet and the left pedal jerks, don't try to fight it. Lean to the left. Put all your strength into it. It can keep the fuselage from spinning and plunging into the sea. And Leo, if the torque reaches a 110, shut down immediately, even if she's screaming at you. Turn it off." Leo sat in the cockpit, his fingers trembling as he fastened his seatbelt. Daniel's words were like hammer blows to his mind. He'd seen Emily's picture in Daniel's locker, and he thought of his newborn son back home. "The data's fine," he mumbled, trying to reassure himself as he looked at the crisp green lines on the dashboard. But his feet, as Daniel had instructed, were feeling a subtle shiver, an unusual throbbing through the metal floor. He looked at Victoria Hale in the back, busy with her tablet, and he realized Daniel wasn't just saving the plane, he was trying to save the souls of those inside it. Scene: the Watcher on the cliff. Daniel drove his old truck to the edge of the coastal cliff. The rain had become a deluge, pounding against the corrugated iron roof like 1,000 tiny drums. He looked at his watch. 6:15 p.m. He was late for dinner. He sat in the darkness, his eyes fixed on the airport lights. He didn't expect an accident. He was simply saddened that he couldn't prevent it. He opened his notebook, filled with Hale X-1 secrets, and began timing takeoff. In the cockpit, Victoria sipped wine, completely unconcerned. "Fly, Leo. Every minute is $1 million. I have the whole world to run, and I'm late." The Hale X-1 took off. It was a beautiful machine. But as it flew into the pitch-black center of the storm, the ghost Daniel had heard began to awaken. At 400 feet, the vibration started. A deep, rumbling sound from the rotor shaft, a frequency that pierced his ears and vibrated directly into his bones. "Mrs. Hale, the torque is fluctuating," Leo yelled. "The system is green, but the control stick is against me. It's like the machine is trying to tear itself apart from the inside." Victoria looked at the sensors. "Marcus said everything was fine, Leo. It's just sensor interference from the rain. Keep climbing." Scene: the arrival of the Titans. In the hangar, the manager was tidying Daniel's locker when the ground began to shake. It wasn't wind. It was the deep, steady beat of heavy military turbines. Two Navy MH-60 Seahawks emerged from the clouds. Their searchlights turned the curtain of rain into walls of white fire. Admiral James Harrison strode into the office. 4 armed Marines followed, their faces expressionless. "Where is Sergeant Daniel Moore?" Harrison demanded loudly. His voice, like thunder, silenced the entire room. The manager stammered, We just fired him, sir. The corporation's decision." Harrison grabbed the manager's tie, pinning him against the glass wall. "High priority? You idiot. Daniel Moore wrote the X-1 Flight Dynamics Manual. He's here under cover, sent by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to inspect the platform's safety before we sign the $10 billion contract. He's the most decorated technician in Navy SEAL history, and you fired him just because he wouldn't let your queen commit suicide?" "Sir," an officer shouted, pointing to a terminal, "I've hacked into the London server. Marcus is using a dampening algorithm, a piece of code specifically designed to hide the actual vibration data from the pilot and flight recorder. He's cooked the data to keep the stock price down during the testing phase." Harrison's face was icy. "He's not just an engineer, he's a murderer. Connect with Moore via a secure channel immediately. Use an encrypted link." Seen the operation? On the cliff, Daniel's phone rang. "Chief, this is Harrison. We're at the airport. The X-1 will crash in 5 minutes if we don't act. Instruct the pilots." "That's an order, Daniel. Get them home." "Admiral," Daniel's voice was steady, the voice of someone who had led countless comrades through the valley of death. "I'm watching. I'll handle this." Scene: the voice in the dark. Inside the X-1, chaos reigned supreme. Flashing lights, the smell of ozone and burning metal filled the cabin. Marcus from London was yelling through the monitor. "The data's fine. Leo, check the connection. This is impossible. It must be pilot error." "Shut up, Marcus," Victoria yelled as the cabin tilted 45 degrees. A glass shattered, the red liquid looking like blood under the emergency lights. Suddenly, a voice rang out in Leo's headset. Not from the control tower. It was Daniel. "Leo, listen to me and ignore the screen. They're tricking you. Your left pedal, it's about to jerk back. When that happens, the main shaft will snap. You have 3 seconds of excess lift. Forget the landing gear. Forget the procedures. When you hear the metal screech, tilt left and dive into the sea. Let the water catch the tail. Right now, boy, tilt left." Leo felt the jerk. It was powerful. He didn't hesitate. He ignored the maintain altitude warning on the screen and steered the helicopter down with terrifying speed. A fraction of a second later, the rotor head exploded. Titanium fragments flew at supersonic speed, tearing through the engine casing, right at the cabin if they flew straight. The helicopter plunged into the water. A wall of darkness enveloped it. Seahawks approached the scene in minutes. Navy divers plunged into the icy water. They pulled a trembling Victoria Hale from the floating debris of the billion-dollar dream. She was alive, but the Iron Queen was gone. When pulled up, she saw a man standing on a distant cliff, his truck headlights cutting through the rain. She saw him close his notebook, turn off the lights, and drive off into the night. Scene: the investigation. The following week, the airport became the center of a global storm. The Navy seized all of Hale Aerospace's servers. Marcus was arrested in London while trying to flee to a country with no extradition treaty. The airport manager was stripped of his license and faced charges of serious negligence. A congressional hearing was convened. Daniel Moore, for the first time in years, wore his white ceremonial uniform. The medals on his chest spoke of a man who had sacrificed everything for the truth. "Progress isn't measured in nautical miles or dollars," Daniel said to the senators, his voice echoing through the hall. "It's measured in the safe return of the souls we entrust to these machines. Data without integrity is just a faster processing lie. When we stop listening to the machines and start listening to the shareholders, we've already fallen." Scene: the confrontation. Victoria Hale walked into the hangar months later. She was bruised, her arm bandaged, her face devoid of its usual arrogance. She found Daniel cleaning a classic radial engine. "I thought I knew everything because I had the data," she said, her voice trembling. "I realized data is just history. It has no soul. It has no courage to say no when a billionaire is screaming yes. You saved my life, Daniel, and I don't even know your name. I'm sorry." She handed him a document. It was the deed of ownership for the hangar, donated to a new fund. "I want you to run the safety oversight board for the entire sea area. Absolute veto power." Daniel looked at the deed, then at the grease stains on his hands. "I don't want your hangar, Victoria. I'll go back to the Navy to train a new generation of mechanics who listen to the sound of steel. But I'll give you some free advice. Next time a mechanic with grease-stained hands says no to you, thank him. He's the only one who tells you the truth." Daniel returned to his small house. Emily was waiting on the porch. The world now knew his name, but to her he was still just Dad. They ate dinner together, a promise kept. Finally, he told her about the Black Hawk in Afghanistan, not as a failure, but as a lesson about why he chose integrity. Scene: the new academy. The Moore Aviation Integrity Academy was established. Above the hangar door was the inscription, "Listen to the steel." Daniel was the head instructor. He didn't teach them how to read screens. He taught them to feel the resonance of a faulty bearing and the heat of a failing circuit. He taught them that their signature on the maintenance logbook was a sacred oath. Scene: the lesson of the heart. One evening, a young trainee asked Daniel, "Sir, with all this new AI, why do we still need to feel the machines?" Daniel smiled and pointed to the heart symbol he had drawn on a tissue years ago. "Because AI knows math, but it doesn't know the price of mistakes. It doesn't have a daughter waiting for it at home. Your hands are the only thing standing between a family and a funeral. If you don't feel the weight of that responsibility, you're not mechanics. You're just part of the problem." Scene: the unseen force. Before the lesson ended, Daniel showed the trainees a video from the cockpit of the X-1. The screeching metal sounded like the cry of a living creature. "Remember," he said, his voice low and heavy, "when you overlook a small mistake, you're beginning to write the script for an accident. Don't let the greed of others blind your ears." Scene: 15 years later. The modern aircraft carrier USS Daniel Moore cut through the waves of the Pacific Ocean. It was the fleet's most advanced ship, named after the man who had brought integrity back to machinery. On deck sat Emily Moore, now a lieutenant colonel and chief engineer for the next generation of stealth aircraft. She was respected by every pilot on board because they knew she didn't just check the cells, she checked the soul of the aircraft. She walked to a prototype fighter. The AI reported, "Ready." The technicians reported, "Ready." Emily placed her hand on the wing. She closed her eyes, ignoring the noise on the deck. She felt a small, regular tick, a beat that shouldn't be there, hidden deep beneath layers of composite materials and code. "Cancel takeoff," she said. "But Lieutenant Colonel, the data says," a young technician began. Emily smiled, her eyes reflecting her father's wisdom. Data has no heart, Corporal. I do. And the plane is telling me it's not ready to fly. We fix it now, or we'll bury a pilot tomorrow. The choice is yours. Scene, the porch. Daniel, now with graying hair, sat on a rocking chair on the porch, watching the sun set over that same coastal cliff. He held Emily's letter in his hand. Dad, I just canceled a sortie today. The sensors are all green, but I heard the ghost. The turntable has the same fatigue signature you found on the X-1. Thank you for teaching me how to listen. The fleet is safe today thanks to you. Two Navy Seahawk helicopters flew past in a low, tight formation. As they passed the cliff, they tilted their wings in a final, solemn salute to the man who had saved the skies by refusing to remain silent. Daniel smiled, a peaceful man, knowing that the steel had finally been heard. Voiceover. They thought they fired a mechanic. They didn't realize they'd lost a conscience. Because in a world of digital lies, truth still rings out like the voice of a craftsman with a wrench. And a daughter who knows how to listen. Stories of integrity and human spirit move you. Sign up for Chip Healing Stories. We tell stories that data misses.